Well, jeepers! You're listening to Smash or Pass.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another interview on the JayBee and Milly channel. I am JayBee and of course with me is Milly.
Hi.
And the special guest who will be interviewing today is Mr Diezel. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
So we're really excited to talk with you today. Of course, you were the first assistant editor on Scooby Doo 2002 and of course the sequel Monsters Unleashed, which we absolutely love if our background isn't evident. Like if we just swung it ever so slightly that way, there's a massive poster with the movie on it. It's definitely one of our favorites, but I'd like to almost build up a timeline first, if that's okay with you, about your career and just looking through IMDb. For all I'm sure that that's not always accurate. Sometimes it gets a few things wrong. It does credit your first, job as an assistant editor as being in 1996 and your first job as an editor in 2008. But before that point, what made you want to go into editor?
Well, I wanted to go into editor once I found out that that is what I wanted to do. Once I figured out, I'll backtrack a little bit. So I originally, when I studied in college, I was going to get into the I guess the news business, and then I got an internship with my state film office. I grew up on the East Coast of the U.S. and I was an intern, and one of the perks was I got to go out to a film set one day. And when I did that, I fell in love with it immediately. And it's like, that's what I wanted to do with my life. I just didn't know what in that business. So finding out about editing took me a couple more years. But once I figured that out, then it was just a matter of being able to break in. And then once I broke in, it was a matter of being able to work with different people and work my way up the chain, which led me to working with Kent. And then I knew at some point it was like it's not that I learned all I needed to know, but at some point I wanted to make the jump because I wanted to do more creative stuff. We can talk a little bit more about kind of what I do as part of the first assistant job, but and so I ended up working with another editor after working with Kent on several shows by the name of Tom Noble, and he was an Oscar-winning editor, and I did a couple of projects, several projects with him, including The Time Traveler's Wife and The First Red, and then I became his co-editor, and then I broke off on my own.
That's amazing. And like you were saying, kind of going back as far as the start, was there ever any movies or editors or even shows that inspired you to, know that this was the industry for you?
I was a huge Star Wars fan. I was into a lot of sci-fi stuff. I liked a lot of movies. I liked a lot of the 80s comedies. And I was fascinated by how they were made. And it just took me a long time to kind of put it together like, oh, I actually like puzzles. I like to actually put this stuff together. So in terms of actual editors, I wasn't necessarily inspired by editors before I broke into the business because again, I didn't know exactly, that was what I wanted to do. But once I did, I started, watching more films and watching them more closely for the editing in them. And, Tom was definitely somebody. There was Martin Scorsese's editor, Thelma Schoonmaker. There's a lady named Ann Coates. And then some of there was an editor, his name is Robert Wise, who did like Citizen Kane and some of those films before he became a director in his own right. So those were some of the initial people that I believe her name Sally Menke, Quentin Tarantino's editor. Pulp Fiction was kind of a mind-blowing film for me in that regard, in terms of how to mess around with the structure and still mess around with structure and time and how to make that all work.
It's just fascinating to hear how really, good editing, bad editing can make or break a movie. It's just such an integral part. And I'd like to say that I've got a little glimpse into that through editing videos, but really it's definitely not comparable. I couldn't imagine what it takes to going into editing a full motion picture. It must just be an entirely different world. So, based upon that, what advice would you have to people watching this that may want to go into editor?
If I guess my first piece of advice, my strongest piece of advice would be to be an assistant. See if you can get into a cutting room and actually be an assistant. You should learn how a cutting room operates. Because that'll give you an insight into both the technical, it'll give you an insight into the creative, it'll give you an insight also into the political as well. So because some of this is about the interpersonal relationships. I was probably more on the quiet side. But when I became a first assistant, when Kent gave me that opportunity, I had to talk to everybody. So I couldn't sit there and be quiet and maybe say a few words. I had to, people were asking me questions all the time. The reason I'm in the position that I'm in is because it allows Kent not to deal with it, if you know what I'm saying. So if you think about this, there's several departments on a feature film. So usually your department head, like if you take the photography, if you take the camera department, your director of photography is the head. And that person is dealing with the creative aspect of it. But he has somebody that deals a lot with the nuts and bolts, with the logistical. Well, it's the same for editorial. So Kent deals largely with the creative stuff, and I deal with the logistical stuff. My job is also, as that assistant, is to help Kent get, at least during production, is to get that assembly up and running so that we can get it into shape to be able to show the director, so that we can go on to the next phase of the project. And then my job changes, because then it's about managing access in a way to them, to the cut, and doing a lot of the little odds and ends that they don't have time for, as well as when they're ready to turn this stuff over. It's about getting that material to the other departments, getting it to the music department so that they can start working on the score, getting it to the sound department so they can start cleaning up the sound and adding all the cool stuff. In some respects, getting it to the visual effects people, so that they can start actually getting the timings down and start getting us temps of the shots. So,
Because that's definitely interesting to learn more about editing and the intricacies of it. Because before starting this series, I would have assumed that for the most part on projects it could be, editor and then assistant editor. But on other projects that I've seen you've been listed on, such as X-Men First Class, there's like, a US department, a Canadian department, sometimes a UK department. So what have been some of your experiences working in that type of, structure been like?
well, it all works together. Generally the U.S. department is at least on the projects that I've worked on, the U.S. department has been the main department, because that's the editor was from the U.S. The post was being done in the U.S. So generally what happens is if I end up going on location, or they end up shooting on location, what'll happen is the editor will go, and the editor will hire his or her first assistant, and that person will go. So then what happens is, we'll take the case of Scooby. So then I was able to get crew to help support me, and ostensibly Kent. So, but that crew had to be hired locally. So I get a bunch of resumes, and we pick the team, and then that becomes the team. So then when we finish shooting, and I'll take Australia as an example, but it could also be used in Vancouver. Then we come back to the US, and then I hire another team, or Kent and I will hire a US based team, and they will carry on for the rest of the show, because Kent and I are the, I'm just using Kent and I right now because we're in the Scooby realm. We are the continuity in the department. So as long as we're there, then we're able to train up the people in each of the places to help us finish the film.
Amazing. And I think, you were leading on to it nicely there. As you can tell from the background, we are excited to dive into all things Scooby. And as we've been saying, you were the first assistant editor for the first Scooby Doo movie. And in regards to, when you first started on that project, how familiar were you with the Scooby franchise at that point?
I was familiar. I watched some of it as a kid. I couldn't say I watched all the episodes, and I wouldn't say that I was a super fan, but I did see. I saw a number of episodes, and oddly enough, the ones I remember were the team ups. Or the guest stars. Scooby Doo with the Harlem Globetrotters, or Scooby Doo with Batman and Robin, and Scooby Doo with Don Knotts. I for some reason they all stick in my head, as opposed to some of the more classic shows. I mean, you have Old Man Smithers and some of the monsters. I recognized a couple of them when we came around to the second movie. Yeah, I was familiar with all of that. I think if you're a certain age, you're at least familiar with it, even if you hadn't seen an episode. It's in the culture. I think I was definitely of that age, because by the time we did the first movie, I mean, you figure at least 2 generations have grown up with Scooby Doo, and I think maybe a third by that point. So yes, so I was excited about it.
That's brilliant. I mean, like you say, I think you would be hard pressed to find anybody who's not familiar with the name Scooby Doo. So, like we said, still at the very start, how did your work on that movie come about?
So, I met Kent a couple of years before, and through his old first assistant editor. I worked on a short film with his old first assistant editor, and then he was able to bring me on to a show that he was doing with Kent, called The Out of Towners. So I was like the very low man, wet behind the ears, new assistant. And so I did a good enough job, that they brought me back I worked on the show for a little bit. They brought me back, and I was able to finish the show. And then a couple of years went by. I didn't have the experience yet to maybe take on that job, and I think Kent knew that. But it got to a point in, I want to say it was November of 2000, and I think Kent had been offered the Scooby job, and he needed to get an early commitment from an assistant to be his first assistant for 2 reasons. One, it was going to be a commitment because they needed a 6-month commitment to live overseas, and so you had to commit early, get your deal done with Warner Brothers, because they had to get the immigration paperwork started for Australia, so that could take a little bit of time. So I think Kent had asked a couple of people that he'd worked with before who had more experience, and either they couldn't or they wouldn't. And I don't know how my name came up. You can ask Kent that at some other point. Either he thought of it or somebody else mentioned it, and he decided to ask me, and I said yes. So did the deal, and I think he went down. I think he went down to Australia maybe like the last week of January. I think he wanted to take a little time because he was bringing his family down and take a little extra time to tour and get set up. I went down the week after, I think was like the end of the first week of February, and then I just had to get right in it. It was I mean, the proverbial grabbing onto the fast moving train. I mean, literally from the time I touched down, it was just, you know, we were in it. So,
I mean, that's phenomenal because when I think about working, I'm thinking about where may be an ideal place for me to catch the bus or what will my commute time will be to this place. But to fathom going to Australia, both the good and bad, because I'd imagine it's quite a way away, but also the fact that it's such an amazing location, like it's definitely one of the places that I'd like to visit the most. Like, what was it like getting to be there on set?
oh, it was tremendous. I mean, it was, you know, when I got down there, first of all, the Australians very friendly, and they had a lot of that stuff buttoned down to make the transition for the American crew that was coming down very easy. So they had in their production office, for instance, when I got down there, they had somebody to we got something called per diem, so we get like a little stipend. So that was ready very early, but they had somebody to help with housing, because what I initially got was I had to stay in a hotel for most of the first week until I found a place. And they helped with the car. They helped with all of that stuff, you know, to make sure that I knew how to get from wherever it was I was living to, I guess it's um, Warner Roadshow Studios. But we just kind of internally, we were always calling it Movie World. It was just easier to remember, Movie World. It's like, hey, we're going to Movie World. So, and that was on the map. That's where I remember that's where it was, you know, when you just plotted in the very early days of the GPS or the map, you could just see it. So then you get there and you get set up, and then you start to go to the sets. And it is, I mean, it is truly mind blowing. I mean, not enough good things can be said about Bill Bowes and his creative genius in terms of the sets. So I got to see almost all of the sets, even as even if they were off the lot. I mean, a tremendous of them were on the lot, or they were very close to the lot. I remember there was a water park that is next to the studios, where there was a little area where they did a few scenes, where they shot a few of some of the night scenes, like when God, I want to say it's when Scooby is when they're in the carts, and then um, and then I went to the first set I went to really was the factory, because that's where they shot the Luna Ghost scene. That was the first thing that they shot. So I got to go up there one night, and that was great. But my favorite sets were the Spooky Hotel and the Spooky Castle. I mean, it was like a fun house come to life. I got to go into the table with the wall of, you know, in the room with the wall of meat. And I loved, I mean, those pendulums that almost hit Fred and Velma. I mean, those things were huge. And I was just amazed at just the intricacy and the detail that went into the whole thing. And even the cave as well. You know, for the last bit of the movie, the vat of the protoplasms and the scrappy reveal. That wasn't quite my favorite. It got a little dusty at times, but there was still like the intricacy. There was like etchings and carvings all over the place, and all had to do with aspects of the movie. And yeah, I mean, what can be said about that? I mean, what negative can be said about that? It was just amazing.
Yeah, no, we managed to find Tangalooma Island Resort on Instagram, and it is a phenomenal place, of course. But like just looking through like the pictures of it, I'm just so sad that there's not some way that you can go to those sets now and see it. Because just all the behind the scenes stuff, I'd have given so much to have just been there in like the Spooky Island Hotel, for instance, just looking around at everything. Like, I just couldn't imagine how
Yeah.
amazing that would have been.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, you know, that was one of the things that, you know, when I did, oh God, like a couple years later, when I worked on Lord of the Rings, I got to go to some of the locations where they did some of the stuff. So they had a couple of remnants. I mean, it was mostly restored back to normal, but they were very careful in pointing out, you know, this is where the Battle of Helm's Deep was. This is Rivendell, this kind of stuff. I wish they'd done a little bit of that with Scooby, but the Tangalooma, that was the only place I didn't get a chance to go, and it was only really for a couple of reasons. One, I'd have to basically commit 2 days to go there, and where we were in the schedule, because that was shot towards the end of the schedule. I think maybe after they got back from Tangalooma, we only had like a couple of weeks left, but we were right in the thick of it, trying to, you know, get the material in for Kent to cut. Plus, there was also just a limited space because the crew and the cast and probably Sugar Ray and they had to, you know, they were staying in the hotel, and I believe like some of the extras and all of that were also staying there, and they had like a little tent community that they did. So it was like, you know, you shoot all day and party all night is what I heard. It was quite an experience for those that went there.
Oh yeah, I mean for sure, and the way that you've described the structure of the movie with, say, maybe Kent Beyda dealing with the creative and you dealing with the nuts and bolts, I think that you know, this movie perhaps more than most will have had more nuts and bolts than you'd expect, because you know it's been notorious and well known for having been so, you know, deeply edited after the fact because of a certain test screening. Like, how involved were you with the movie after that test screening?
Oh, it's you know, my job was virtually the same throughout that process. Um, you know, it was just you. Let me put it this way. So whatever I was doing, and if we had done, you know, if I had done this job, it was basically I was doing some of those aspects over again, you know, because they were doing their creative aspects over again. So it was like, okay, so now so for instance, it's like, now we have to make these changes. Okay, we make these changes, and Raja and Kent and the producers have looked at it and approved it. So now we have to get the studio involved. So either we make an output for them to look at, or they come into the cutting room, they look at it and they give their notes, and we go through all of this stuff. And then I have to get it back out to, you know, to all the departments again. You know, it's like, hey, here's the new cut. That's part and parcel. That happens on every show. You know, you do revisions and you're fine tuning. We're not necessarily doing as much of a as many changes as we did for the first Scooby, but it is part of the process.
Definitely. I mean, I think because the first live action movie is such a fan favorite, there's been so many people over the years trying to piece together what that original cut looked like. There's been a few things materialize online that people try and work out where to input it. Ken was lovely in terms of going over his memories of what he remembered that had been cut. Is there any deleted scenes that you remember that were in the first edit that hadn't made it to the second?
No, no. I think what Kent did a very thorough. I watched the interview. Kent did a very thorough version. I think the only things that would have been missing would have been like extensions, some jokes that didn't. I know there's one joke I don't think he mentioned in this. There was a joke when they were in the airport that Shaggy did some sort of joke about, hey, it's like Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch with, but we're not, you know, I forgot exactly how he compared Mystery Inc. to Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. And I think we actually did test with that, and that joke didn't play with the audience, and so we ended up losing that. No, he went over most of that, and by and large, and I totally agree. The scenes that were deleted. Oh, there was one other little thing where I think Velma and Fred are walking through Spooky Castle, and Velma is it's not a deleted scene, but Velma is talking about she's talking about somebody in their I think the implication is she's talking about Daphne, but it was like, the luscious sweater bending, just all these descriptions, and she's kind of imagining, and Fred kind of snaps her back to reality. It's like, Velma, what are you talking about? So there was a little bit like that, but in terms of actual other deleted scenes, what you see on the the Scooby DVD or the Scooby Blu-ray Plus, I think whatever Kent went over, I think pretty much outside of having to change the demons to creatures and the changes we had to make for the PG version, that it was pretty much covered.
Okay, perfect. And do you have a favorite memory from your time working on that first movie?
Gosh, I mean, that first movie, I mean, being in Australia, that whole experience is something that was just really one of the most special experiences of my career. It's hard to pinpoint a specific thing, because I mean, I worked like a dog, no pun intended. I mean, I was working a lot, but it was so fun, and I could come home, and I had an apartment right on the beach, or if we worked late, I remember going out with some of the Australian crew a couple of times. I do remember one of my favorite things was just almost the familial aspect. It was a really tight crew, and one of the things that I really enjoyed that I had never done, I won't speak for Kent, but I had never done it, was I had never worked on a project where they had afternoon tea. So you'd have lunch, and then like 3 to 4 hours later, we would have another break. And it was like in those breaks, which was like 30 minutes or 45 minutes, you'd kick the footy around. You'd go, and you could just, everybody would just be out chilling and having a snack and having a little something to drink. And you got to know a lot of the members of the crew that way. So one of how I said that Kent was largely the creative, his thing. The one thing he did leave me to do creatively on both films was to cut the gag reels. So that was my job, and I will in a couple minutes. I'll play you a little bit of it. I'll play you a couple little things. So and I'll just leave it at that, and I'll show you a couple pictures and a couple of little trinkets and stuff that I got. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that is absolutely fantastic. And of course, like we're about to transition over to the second movie now. Would showing those things fit better at this point, or would you like to wait until after we've kind of gone over the second movie a bit?
Yeah, we can go over the second movie. I can show you. Yeah, I'll just show it all to you after.
Oh, that's absolutely amazing. And the second movie, we love that one as well. It's an amazing one. I think quite different from the first one in many ways as well, from an audience perspective. But from your perspective behind the scenes, was there any real change in your methodology going into that sequel versus the first one?
No, I don't think so. Because a lot of the same department heads were brought back, so we all knew what we were capable of. Kent brought me back, and Kent and Raja wanted me to work on the second one. We had the same producers. We had Bill Bowes was back, Peter Crossman was back. So all of the key players, David Newman was coming back as the composer. So we had a foundation on that. So then it became really okay now, and James Gunn was brought back. So, but now we also knew, has been said a number of times, we knew what the parameters were with that, and now it's like, okay, what can we do now? And obviously we took the more is more, bigger monsters. Let's go larger. Let's have more Scooby. let's delve into the characters a little bit more and kind of their, kind of their doubts, their fears, and, a little bit that we may have touched on in the first movie, but we went, I think, deeper in the second movie, especially with Shaggy and Scooby feeling that they were somehow not on equal standing with the other members of Mystery Inc.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a few curiosities with the second movie where it's a little bit different to the first movie, which I was, quite aware of with the test screening, then that was edited to the theatrical version, whereas on the second one, it seems to be a case of people remembering that there were some things in that theatrical version, like Shaggy reacting a certain way to like whipped cream by like the fridge, that didn't appear on the DVD release. Do you know anything about, edits in between the theatrical release and the home media release at all?
That I don't know. That's actually probably the first I've heard about that. So that, unfortunately, by that time I'm off the show. So the only times I hear about some of those types of changes, not necessarily for the home video, but for like the airline release or maybe the TV cut of the movie, that happens, and every once in a great while, I have a little something to do with that, but I don't remember having done that on either of the Scooby movies.
It's an interesting one. Definitely have to look around for that because I've never really heard about that before. Of course, like you say, with like, televised productions, things can be changed. Even music can be changed. But yeah, first I've heard about that. And there's also some other curiosities of Monsters Unleashed, from the behind the scenes. Of course, in our recent interview with Peter Crosman, there were some scrapped concepts such as Scooby Doo going to be turned into George Bush in the potion scene. Like so many ideas that were thrown around but didn't exactly materialize. Are there any other things like that you remember from the second movie at all?
No, I'd actually forgotten about that until I saw the Peter Crossman interview, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that was bandied about. Unfortunately, I don't have the recall of that because some of that stuff I may not have been in the room at the time. Uh, Kent or Raja might have mentioned it to me. But again, where I am, sometimes I'm within earshot of them, but I'm also trying to do some of the other tasks that need to be done to keep the cutting room moving. So it wouldn't surprise me, but I did remember a little something like that. I don't remember about any other thing though that came up, but I know that I do remember the visual effects challenges on that movie, definitely more vividly than the previous movie, because I mean they really did push it, and once we got through the whole thing about which monsters were going to be in there, and the stuff that was going to be CG as opposed to live action, it took a while to get that in its final form. I do remember all the iterations that needed to happen to make that the theatrical version that you've seen. So
I do remember the first time seeing this movie and just thinking how far it had been pushed to get all those villains in there. It is so nostalgic as well to watch back and see those villains. It is, such an enjoyable watch still to this day. Is there any memories that you have from working on it or scenes that you remember that stand out to you the most?
oh boy, on the second one, was I had a lot of fun on the second one, but I think if you talk with a lot of the people that were on the first one and the second one, I think as much as I like Vancouver a lot, I mean, it doesn't compare with Australia. Anybody, it was like we had our own little exclusive club so that if we just said if we said like Tangaluma, for example, the people that knew what that reference was would just like, snicker, and it's like, oh my gosh. Um, I remember seeing fewer of the sets on Scooby 2 because I think we were a little further away from where a lot of it was shooting. But it was, in a way, it was a little bit like Groundhog Day, because it was like once we got back from the shoot, I think we literally went back to the same building, the same rooms that we were in for Scooby 1, but it was like the furniture had changed, but it was like, oh, okay, this feels familiar. We're doing Scooby. We're here in this building, and I do remember. I remember it, even though we had a lot of, there was a lot of things, and just in terms of visual effects, and it was, definitely more ambitious. It was overall, I think, maybe a slightly smoother process, just for the reason that there was continuity between the top people going through. So.
And it turned out to be such an exceptional movie as well. Like we said, it is just so nostalgic, and it recently celebrated its 20th anniversary, and still there are so many people that still would go back and watch it, or even introduce to younger generations still coming through. What does it feel like to have worked on a movie that has just that level to it, of it still being almost as fresh today as it was, 20 years ago?
Well, I feel honored to have done it. I realized, looking back at it, and I actually looked at both movies the other day. There is, it's in its bubble, but in a way, it's timeless. You know what I mean? It can, like you were saying, it can play 20 years later and still feel as fresh. I didn't know that was going to be the case. But it was something that, now we've been through this 20 years removed, 22 years from the first movie, and we've had the cast is mostly known for that role. I mean Sarah Michelle Gellar, obviously they think of Buffy, and then they think of Daphne, I think, but Matt Lillard is Shaggy. And they've been able to parlay that. I don't know if you've seen the Robot Chicken skit,
yeah.
where they've participated, and it goes back to the point. I know that you had asked us in one of the interviews about the PG-13 or R-rated version, and whether that should have been released, or my opinion was, I think it's not waffling. I think everybody got it right. I think maybe that was a little bit ahead of its time. I think the studio got it right by converting that to a PG movie, because if it had been a PG-13 or even an R, and I don't think it would have ever have been an R, how much does it hurt the real sales of like the merchandise and the toys and that kind of stuff, which can earn multiples of what the actual movie makes. But as I'd said before, there were three, they were looking at a third generation growing up with Scooby. Now there's 4 or 5 generations, and a lot of them were ready for a more adult themed Scooby. But whether a theater, a big film was the venue for it, it may not have been in 2000 or 2002 and 2004, but clearly from the small screen, you've got the Robot Chicken stuff, and I think you've got Velma, that Mindy Kaling is doing, which I think is now on its 2nd season. Who knows? I mean, maybe that will eventually lead into a either an animated or another. Maybe they will take another stab at it. Who knows?
Yeah, it's definitely one of those ones where I really desperately want to see the unedited, the full cut of that today, but I'm really glad almost that it didn't happen back then because it was so it was such a shock factor looking back now, looking at the theatrical edit of the first one, like where it tiptoes the line so well between child friendly and edgy teenage movie that I just think is such a sweet spot that I only think a handful of movies have really caught. So I think that's phenomenal. But I would
I
like to see that eventually.
Well, kudos to Raja and Kent because they and Chuck and our producers Chuck Roven and Richard Suckle because they really, you know, they all really worked hard to reshape it, smooth it, reorient it. That's probably a better word to achieve that balance. And so I was very happy with the final product on that. You know, the script that I read, which was largely the script that was shot. I mean, it was PG-13. I mean, easily PG-13. And but it just didn't turn out to be that way. I mean, you know, there's somewhere in those archives is Kent's assembly minus, you know, all the Scooby shots, you know, a lot of, you know, backgrounds and stuff like that, but it's there in the archives. I don't know if that's where it'll stay or who knows what will happen, you know, a groundswell, maybe they would put the money together to do something. It would be a very, very, very difficult job.
I always imagine it resting somewhere like the Ark from Indiana Jones in like a big warehouse in a box somewhere. It's like some hidden treasure. Oh, it's just amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I mean that is, I don't want to say that's so far from the truth. So what basically at the end of the shows, I'm talking about in 2002, was Warner Brothers would send us a bunch of boxes, and we had to put all of our materials in the boxes, all of the print, all of the negative, all of the paperwork, all of the, you know, the drives, the files, all of that stuff. And they generated a show specific code that we had to put on all the boxes, and then we had to inventory all the boxes, and then they would come and take them to that big warehouse wherever it is, the big Indiana Jones warehouse. So somewhere there is all of this stuff, not only with Scooby, with Scooby Doo 2 and many other films.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, I really want to go see it though. But yeah, I guess that does conclude all of the Scooby related questions that we have for you today. And so I guess at this point, this sounds like a really good place for if you wanted to show us those reels, the gag reel and everything, now if that's okay.
Sure, of
Oh,
course.
thank you.
So I'll show you some bits of that. I have I'll show you a couple pictures and stuff like that. So I will share my screen. Okay. So the first one I'll show you is, can you see that?
No, not yet.
Oh, let's
Oh,
do
it's
that.
it's just loading now.
Okay.
This has
So
started screen
Oh,
share.
there we go.
Okay, can you see that? It says theaterette and editing room.
Yes.
Yes.
So that is where we did the assembly. You know, that is in Australia. That is actually on the Warner Roadshow lot. And that's where Kent and I worked. And that's where we ran the dailies for the producers and Raja and everybody. And this is where we worked. That was my everyday office for 6 months. Let's see. So then, and then I have one picture from the cutting room in Los Angeles. So you can see there, that's me on the left.
Wow.
There's Kent, and there's Neil Fanning. Neil is such a sweetheart. I think you guys have either interviewed him, you've met him, correct? Or interviewed?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we interviewed him and then met him like 2 months later.
I love how even back then he used to wear a Scooby Doo t-shirt all the time. I don't think I've ever seen him without one.
He is a super fan. Now, my one thing, so I don't know if you can see my cursor. So right here, You see where I'm kind of
Oh, is
circling?
it one of the Pamela Anderson toys?
It is. I took it from the set, and I literally had it until last year. I wish I had done this interview with you from last year, because if I had done that before I misplaced it or something, I would have sent it to you.
Oh no,
I know.
that's
I know.
heartbreaking.
I searched my garage for that and could not find that. But I've had that for a long time. It was an actual set. It was actually one of the ones where, you know, when he flew into the dolls, it's an actual set used Pamela Anderson.
Oh wow, that is incredible.
Yeah. So let's see. So I also got to go to both premieres.
Mm.
But there was a big catch. I got to attend the premiere, but I had to do what was called the run through. So basically, I had to do the technical check in the morning. So I had to be there like all day. They said, well, if you go and you watch this and you make sure everything's fine and do all of this, then you get an invite to the premiere. So I have a couple pictures from the first Scooby premiere. So this is on the red carpet.
Oh wow.
First, I know this was taken with a film camera, but I will this lady right here. You see where? Can you see
Oh yeah.
the one who's like right in the middle? That's Jenna Fisher.
I
That is
thought it
the lady
was.
from the Office, because
Hmm.
she used to go out with James Gunn on the first Scooby, and she just happened to walk into my photograph at that point. So we had the premiere, and then, so you see that building kind of in the background, right? On the other side of that is where they threw like an after party. It was a daytime premiere because it was a kids movie. So, so you had some swag and some activities that could be done. So you had little something like that, and then there's a picture of me next
Oh,
to
that's wonderful.
the big Scooby, and then they had this character, that the Luna Ghost. They brought out the actual, the Luna Ghost head and had it on the stick. As you can see, there was like a tiki, there's a little bit of a tiki influence with the Spooky Island, especially with the Spooky Island stuff. So that was the Scooby 1 premiere. And then the Scooby 2 premiere, this is more on an actual cell phone camera. So, it was at the same theater. So you can see the Scooby Doo 2 posters. And then if you look and you head to the theater, so this lady right here, both Scoobies changed my life. So the Scooby 1 changed my life professionally, because I was able to do a big show and it got me the notice of the studio. And Scooby 2 is where I actually met my wife, who is the lady in black in this picture. I met her on Scooby 2. So this is Mann's Chinese Theater in Los Angeles. So that's where they had the premieres for both Scoobies. So so there was a little bit of that, and just a couple of little things to show you. So I have my Scooby Bonafide that Peter Crossman, I'll get out of this just for a second. I have my Scooby Bonafides that Peter Crossman. I too have the Scooby. It's a little tough to see in the daytime, but I have my Scooby thing. But the one thing I did have from Scooby 1 that I don't know if anybody's ever showed you is, I think we got this at the end of production. As a thank you, I think, for going to Tangaluma. I forgot what department made it. They made these little Spooky Island goblets. So
Oh my
you can see
gosh.
They
Scooby-Doo
are
2001,
amazing.
and then Spooky Island. Isn't that a cool?
That is
That is
awesome.
incredible.
Yeah, I'll show you a little bit of the bottom of that too, so you can see. Yeah, so I have this on my book. I have this and the Scooby on my bookcase to help hold some videos and stuff like that. So so yeah, it was so I have a little bit of that. So let me ask you this, and I will play a couple little things of the gag reel. I put a watermark in there, just a property of Warner Brothers, and then there is some of the audio I'm not going to be able to play for you because it has other copyrighted music. I don't know how much I can. I mean, I might be able to play a couple of seconds and you'd be fine. I don't want you to get. I don't want you to get in trouble with YouTube or
We can
anything.
edit around it, like as the case may be as well. Like
Okay.
we can mute things and cover things as we need to. So it should be no problem on our end at all.
Okay. So I will play I'll play a couple little sections for you of this, and I'll kind of walk you through a little bit of what I did. So
Thank you.
let's see. Let me talk the Scooby one. Okay. So so there were certain gags based just on what was happening at the time. The way I approached the gag reel when I did this, and I did the same for Scooby 2, is, you know, what were either some of the hot button topics or, you know, something that was being talked around on set. And I also wanted to get as much of the crew in the gag reel because that's who you made it for. I want to get as much of the crew in as possible. So let me share the screen again so that you can see a little bit of that. Okay, so let's do this. So right now this is there's a song that goes under this. So can you guys see it?
Yeah, that's perfect. And again, like audio shouldn't be an issue on our end. We can edit around. Oh wow.
Okay. Well, let's okay. See if you can edit around. I'll play a little bit of this. I'll play this first bit.
Thank you.
It's a song by a group called the Propeller Heads.
In to eat the dust of Baja California.
My Virginia too here.
So there's a little bit of probably some stuff you haven't seen before.
No,
All of that.
All of that is like new. That's amazing.
It is incredible. That is amazing.
So let me I'm going to skip and I'll play you a couple of little things. This was a little thing that I think, I don't know, somebody might have mentioned it, I think in one of the interviews, where we were getting close to a potential actor strike. So we had to finish shooting it before that was going to happen. So I did this little thing with the actor doubles and the real actors. So it was before the strike deadline, after the strike deadline.
Ah, Mystery Inc. You all seem rather cheery. Good news, I hope. Mr. Mononucleosis? Yes. We have hit a clue smorgasbord. But who could be behind such a thing? You. Me? I'm a suspect. It's mostly just because you creep me out. Oh, I see. Oh. Ah, Mystery Inc. You all seem rather cheery. Good news, I hope. Yes. Milly? I'm a suspect. Oh, I see. Oh.
So that was a little,
That
yeah.
was-
So there was a little gag.
That's wonderful. That was like looking into an alternate reality for a minute there.
to see the Scooby head as well. Isn't that the one that Neil Fanning takes with him to the
I'm sure
Comic-Cons
it is,
now?
yeah.
Is that, I'm sorry, say it again?
The Scooby head that was used in the second one as Shaggy was walking away. I think
Right.
Neil Fanning now has that and he takes it to Comic-Cons with him. I'm sure we've seen it.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, okay. I'll show you one other thing from this gag reel. So this was so this is Rowan Atkinson. Sometimes a director will have an actor do a series of a certain line. So this was a line that was not in the movie. It was part of the Velma dance, the Velma singing, the Too Good to Be True. It's the you know that the bloody skulls are non-alcoholic. So this was one take.
She does know that bloody skulls are non-alcoholic, doesn't she? Does she know that bloody skulls are non-alcoholic? She does know that bloody skulls are non-alcoholic, doesn't she? She does know that bloody skulls are non-alcoholic, doesn't she? Now she knows that bloody skulls are non-alcoholic, doesn't she? I wonder if she knows that bloody skulls are non-alcoholic. I hope she knows that bloody skulls are non-alcoholic. Does she know that bloody skulls are non-alcoholic? She does know that bloody skulls are non-alcoholic, doesn't she? Now, she does know that bloody skulls are non-alcoholic, doesn't she? Does she know that bloody skulls are non-alcoholic? I think I've done enough of those.
Yeah, something, I don't know.
I always like that one.
That's brilliant.
Oh, that's awesome. And you really get the personality across as well, like. Oh wow.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I won't play this. This was and this will be the last thing I play from this, and then I'll show you one or two little bits from the Scooby Doo gag reel. So I did one bit where basically it was about, you had mentioned about the Neil Fanning Scooby head. So I did basically something to think of this, the Olympic fanfare. So that's what I put, that's the music that I put under it. And so. So Kent had been talking, and Peter Crossman had been talking about, the gray balls and the reflective balls to help with and this is one you probably haven't seen. That's the Scrappy head for.
Oh wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, the grandma one.
The grandma, and then taking Scooby hostage. There was also a little Scrappy maquette, and then that got a big cheer from the crew when I put that in when they saw the gag. They loved it. That elicited a big cheer.
Wow.
This
That was
is
actually
amazing.
that was actually one of my favorite memories from Australia, was showing the gag reel to the crew that night at the wrap party. It was fantastic. So
It's
So those are-
amazing. If there was hours of it, I'm sure I could sit
Yeah.
and watch it all. It is
Literally
amazing.
5 hours. I could just sit there and then watch it again, press the repeat button after that. Oh my gosh.
So let me show. I'll show you one or two things from the Scooby Doo gag reel. Which means there's a little more if I, come back on and we want to talk more things Scooby. So
Oh yeah, that'd be phenomenal. Maybe for the 23rd anniversary of the first movie. Oh wow.
yeah. So there's one little thing I gotta go past this. So you see that there's a difference of and how they look, right? And how the Scooby 1 looks with Scooby 2. And it was basically just the process that we used for dailies between both films. So without getting too technical about it, that was we were able to use the negative for doing dailies on the second film, where we couldn't use it before on the first film, because of cost and handling and stuff like that. So that's why some of the material that you see from Scooby 2 looks better.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me show you. This is I did kind of some of the same beats. But this one was Shaggy this time. This is the one take equivalent from the Rowan Atkinson.
We will be terrific and fantastic and spectacular and cease to be loserific, lame-tastic, and fantasticals, testicles. We will be loserific, stink-tastic, and lame-tacular. We will cease to be lame-tastic, stink-tacular, and just all around bad. We will cease to be loserific, stink-tacular, and statistical. We'll cease to be loserific, stinktacular, and lame-tastic. We'll cease to be done.
So there was a little something like that. There's a lot that has been said about our monsters for Scooby 2, and those that were in, those that were out. So I figured I would do an in memoriam segment on the gag reel for those that did not make it.
Oh,
So I have this music under it. I mean, I can play it with the music, but it's just like this sad memorial music. I forgot from what soundtrack. So, but I'll play.
I am a man of my grade. Yeah, boy. Party balloons make me smile. And red confetti too. Well, it makes me happiest of all. Hi, it's Truffin Scooby Doo.
So
that's
That's
amazing.
awesome. Like
That is incredible.
I can't believe how like that in memoriam like gag has become one of the most mind-blowing things I've ever seen. That's awesome. I think that's the first time I've heard Redbeard and the clown speak. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So those are some yes. So there are definitely some more gags to sell to show you, I should say. So but that could be for another time. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing. That'd be
Yeah.
incredible.
Like
I'm
Milly
sure I
said,
could sit and
literally.
watch them on repeat a good few
Yeah,
times.
if each movie had a 10-hour gag reel,
I'd watch it.
no
I would
sleep,
commit to
no
that.
coffee, just I'm locked in.
I'd take the day off work to watch that.
That's
Like,
crazy. Oh, that is phenomenal. We'll definitely be
oh,
sure
wow.
to follow up on that because it's just amazing. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I guess going on to the future now, are you working on anything currently or recently that you can talk about at all today?
Yes, I am. I have a movie that I edited, and I'm working as far as you can go away from Scooby Doo. It's a drama thriller. It is about a kid who is unfortunately sold by his father to a coyote and is smuggled across the U.S. border to work in a sweatshop
Oh god.
as bonded labor. It's a pretty serious, harrowing movie, but it's important and it has a very timely message about being conscious of the fashion that we buy, the food that we eat, other products that we buy, and how they're made. So yeah, again, that comes out Labor Day weekend, and in the U.S. Internationally is to be determined. But yes, I am looking forward to that. It has been a labor of love and a very long journey. I've been working on that since, oh gosh, since almost early in COVID. It's been that long.
Oh,
So,
wow.
but we will be ready to release in a few months. So
Amazing. And did you say the name of it right at the start? Sorry, our internet
I
picked the
did,
most
yes.
inopportune moment to cut out after we've seen all that amazing things. It then
Yeah.
decided that it's going to use this moment to break up. So could you just tell us the name again? Sorry, that's the one bit I think
Sure.
it missed.
Sure. It's called City of Dreams.
Perfect. That's amazing.
Thank you. And is there an ideal place for people to keep up with that project or indeed your future works going forward?
Well, they can always obviously check my IMDb. We will start to have more of a social media presence with City of Dreams. I don't have anything yet. There have been a couple of sporadic articles, but as we get closer, there'll be a trailer and you'll start to see it everywhere, I think. Yeah, just stay tuned.
That's absolutely amazing. We'll be sure to leave that, including the IMDb, in the description down below. But yeah, that does conclude all of the questions that we had for you. Just thank you so much again for joining us, being so generous with your time, and of showing us parts of the gag reels, which my mind's going to be blown about them for
Mine is
seeing
too. I
them.
can't believe you said that concludes all the questions we have. I still have hundreds of questions I didn't know I had going into this now.
Well, that's fine. Yeah, then we'll have them for the next interview.
Well, that is fantastic. And of course, thank you so much to people for watching this. This has been another interview on the JayBee and Milly channel. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.